Recently I was getting into this game. It's called Armored Brigade, and I was enjoying it in a way that really made me think about strategy games, like what they're all about, why I love them, and what goes into working them out. And I wanted to document that a little bit. I wanted to narrativize it to share it with you, dear reader. Let's contextualize this game a little bit. Here's some footage I've taken from a couple of YouTube channels of people playing some different adjacent games from the series of Combat Mission and Team Tactics. This is a subgenre of strategy games you might call simulationist tactical real-time war games. All would be successors to a respected series from the 90s called Close Combat, and therefore influenced by, I heard of this legendary hyper-detailed, super complicated tabletop game from like the 80s called Advanced Squad Leader. For me, these titles really fall into a best of both worlds place. They have a high level of detail, ballistics, information sharing between units that travels up and down the chain of command, location-based armour penetration, and lots of little details. Like, I love that the smoke screens drift in the wind. But all this detail is at the same time rendered very clearly and literally. By that I mean that if you're lucky enough to find a great line of sight and catch an enemy tank commander with his head stuck out of his porthole, you see a tracer travel from gun barrel, arc in between any buildings and trees, and catch that tank commander right in said head. If soldiers are taking cover behind a wall, you know they're covered because you can't see them behind the wall anymore. These are all things that not very long ago would have just been floating pop-up texts and status icons or percentage modifiers down on the unit cards. It makes it a lot more intuitive, but it also makes it cinematic. And this is where the best of both worlds thing comes in. These are still very slow-paced, deliberate, cerebral games, but they can also be really visceral and exciting. But having everything like this comes at a cost. Although they're a lot less dry than they used to be, these are still some heavy games to play, and heavy pieces of software to run for that matter. Not really viable to fire up one of these guys on a school night, have a little blast, maybe keep switching between tasks to and from. I also get apprehensive about them because they're dependent on these pre-authored scenarios, hand-coded ones. And I mean, I'm sure there's plenty out there to last a guy like me forever, but I still hate to spoil them, you know? So Combat Mission and Team Tactics sit on my hard drive like a digital version of the good china that you never use. When I came across Armored Brigade, it struck me as just the compromise I was looking for. It's got a similar kind of design aspiration. It's got a robust seeming dynamic mission generator, and it's been stripped down just enough to take the curse off. I liked the idea so much that I was willing to put up with this. Now look, Armored Brigade is a 3D game under the hood, but it looks like this. You've got contour lines, NATO symbols, 2D sprites. It's not really your grandpa's hex-based grognard snooze fest, but it looks like it. By the way, I probably love your grandpa's grognard snooze fest, but selling it to you, I procrastinated so much that Armored Brigade 2 came out to the rescue. More or less the same game, but with these snazzy visuals. I mean, it's hardly a tech demo for the latest Unreal Engine, but it does the trick. And boy, it's nice to be able to get a sense of what's going on without using this line of sight tool over and over again, or referring to this clunky little isometric map. What I'm essentially saying is that Armored Brigade 2 is playable. And in that spirit, let's get playing. We would start that with a little look at this mission generator. Interesting fact, did you know that it's not actually mandatory to set these games during the Second World War? We're looking here at the part of Germany known as the Fulda Gap, which, well, I guess it was part of that conflict. I seem to recall Germany being pretty involved in it, but it's more famous as the place where it was likely to hit the fan in the event that the Cold War went hot, and that is the premise of Armored Brigade 2. It's all a bit unfamiliar to me as well, which is all the more reason for us to not agonise over every little detail now. We're trying to get some data, we're trying to get some experience. I have chosen an area here. It is this place, Schwarz in Hesse. Here is a building which in the game looks like a church, but our street view makes it look a little more secular. It is called the Auerberg Hall. What does that mean? I don't know, but here's something that's a bit clearer to me. Fight bravely, men, for tonight we dine in the burger house. I have learned that you want to make the size of this zone a little larger than the minimal, or you can wind up with these weird battles where the forces are already shooting each other and already in engagement range from the very first second. But earlier I set up a battle that was the minimal size, and I remembered some of the numbers that the game set automatically that I'll be bringing in later. Number one thing I'll be doing here is turning this clock down to be closer to 1960 than 1990. Like I mentioned, I'm definitely not the only one who's more familiar with 1940s than the 1960s, so frankly I don't know what to do with helicopters and guided missiles. This is the sort of thing that I'd like to explore a bit deeper going ahead, but for now we'll simplify it. This is meant to be a whirlwind tour sort of thing. This is an important setting. I'm choosing infantry, which is probably most appropriate for a small battle, and it means that we'll be using that troop type mostly, instead of lots of tanks or APCs. This one needs to be set because it helps the AI determine a basic paradigm for its behaviour. This one is also very important. Different nations have access to different sorts of troops and equipment at any given time, but also not thinking too hard about it, I just pitted Germany against Germany. Having said that about keeping it simple, I do want to take a little bit of extra time to do something that I hope people don't find too annoying and make sure we're being explicit about some of the fundamentals. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we don't skip over anything that maybe tends to go a bit unexamined when it shouldn't. In particular, I'm talking mission type, combat score and victory points. We are competing not only to damage and destroy the enemy's units, but also to control these key points, the objectives, which in this case would be better placed somewhere around here. You have to balance both goals. You don't win by taking this arbitrary square of clay at the cost of your whole force, and the balance is different between the different mission types. Success is measured by victory points, which in Armored Brigade go down. When one side achieves goals, the other side's victory points decrease, and whichever side reduces the other to 0 first wins the overall battle. Oh, by the way, I'm just going to change the number of victory points to the number which I got from the smallest map size. Let's fight a meeting engagement, because it's probably the most straightforward. Each side deploys in these coloured areas on the edge of the map, and we'll be competing for an objective in the centre. Oh, and since we're playing on such a small map, I'm also going to decrease the size of the deployment areas so there's a little more space between us. The other type of battle you can fight is an attack, which is a defend from the perspective of the other side. In these missions, the objectives are placed on the defender's side of the map. But because it's easier to defend than attack, the attacking side needs a handicap. Looking in the manual, this is 50% less victory points for the defending side. Also notice here that for a meeting engagement, there's 50% more weight placed on casualties compared to taking objectives. But that's not quite enough of a handicap. There's also another factor, which is combat score. Combat score measures the power of the units. Attackers get more combat score, which means they can bring a larger or stronger force to the battle. You draft your force in a menu like this, based on the combat score, so we have a lot of room to pitch forces against each other that look very different, but theoretically are equally powerful in the final balance. And this can be very profound. Let's pop back to 1983 for a moment and have a look at a little example. If the USA faces Poland, a cutting-edge main battle tank for the Yanks might look something like this M1. 339 points apiece if you buy them in this platoon. I need to familiarise myself a little more with these data cards, but it looks like it has some sort of reactive armour that's 380mm thick against bullets, but has effectively 600mm protection for certain types of attack, which are called chemical. This tank drives faster than I ever get to where I live. It has night vision on all of its weapons, including 3.5 kilometres on the main cannon. And it has plenty of ammo for these three guns: 105mm, 7.62mm, 12.7mm. The Poles, however, seem to be restricted to these old Soviet T-72s. Maybe that was well-respected equipment a decade ago when it was new, but they're looking a bit inferior now. Although these stats sometimes represent a little bit of retrofitting. This thing can barely go fast enough to get booked in a school zone. Its armour thickness seems to be comparable, but it's lesser in this chemical component here. That's way less ammunition, and also probably the steering wheel flies out the window while you're driving along. But they're 134 points here. You could field 5 of them to every 2 M1s. Or perhaps you'd prefer an entire extra infantry company. Perhaps you'd like 4 jet planes. There is an overall restriction, however, related to where we set the infantry force type earlier. Up here you can see that we have a budget to spend in the categories of recon, infantry, mechanised, motorised, armoured, support and aircraft. Plus there's a few points to be spent down here on things like off-map artillery and minefields. I've now spent a little time setting it up, and even though just before I was explaining the concept of asymmetrical forces to you as if you were an idiot who's never played a game before, I'm still surprised. Look, you probably know how it works in this period, right? We're going to be seeing smaller armies with better training and equipment from the West, from NATO, facing off against larger, lower quality forces from the East, the Warsaw Pact. I went into the West Germans and spent the 1880 points it recommended on something of a royal sampler, a company of infantry, and a platoon or section each of mechanised, armoured and mortar, so we can have a little play with everything that's on offer, although no aircraft. But then I went over to the East Germans and they're living in the past. These are all tanks from the 40s, man. Just to get the points up, I had to add a whole other infantry company, basically a second platoon of all the different things. I put in this motorised rocket launcher thingy. I put in 2 jet planes and 2 hard-boiled eggs. I'm sure I'm reading this right. 1880. This is considered an equivalent force. And I think we're ready for deployment. Welcome to Simulated Schwarz. Welcome to deployment. This is where we get to freely place our units within the green zone on our side of the map, and also give them some initial orders. This is important in Armored Brigade 2 because of the way this game and the genre work. So leave your commander's hat off for a second and we'll have a little look at that. As promised, we're going to see a real-time, high-fidelity depiction of this battle. But think of it as looking at the outcome. On the other hand, our control over the situation is going to be indirect, abstract, limited. This is a design concept that helps us play the role of commander. The fantasy, of course, is that we're the big ideas guy. We're in a little tent on the hill with many of the comforts of home brought in for us because we lay out the plans, we factor in a few contingencies, make a couple of critical choices at key moments, but we don't run around in a frenzy telling every vehicle and man exactly where to stand every second. There are a few aspects of this in Armored Brigade too. Fog of war is very strict. We can't see anything that none of our units can see. They can't see things just because we can. Keep in mind, these squares are about 30 metres on each side, and the entire battlefield is about 4 kilometres long. At that scale, things get blocked off easily. Look at the line of sight tool applied to the objective square, for example. Anybody who's in that objective defending it is only going to be able to see into these wide areas. They'll barely be participating in the battle at all. The scale also means that units won't necessarily spot everything the second it does enter the white zone. The enemy is in camo, generally trying not to be seen. We're going to be squinting for distance, looking through binoculars or periscopes. You know, it's very hard to see out of a tank. Sometimes forces are going to get surprisingly close before we see them. Also, units won't always follow orders perfectly. Stress and danger can make them modify the orders a little bit, maybe hesitate or hide or flee, and they do have a little autonomy in exactly what path they take, where they stand, and especially in their target selection. Additionally, Armored Brigade has command delay. It's different depending on what nation you're playing, how many commands you're giving how quickly, and a few factors in the field. But every time we give a command, like this green one here, it's going to take at least 10 seconds and potentially several minutes before the units actually start acting on them. But command delay does not apply during deployment. Also, there's a few key things you can do for free, like popping smoke in an emergency or cancelling hold fire orders, which is required in order to be able to spring ambushes. We can create deactivated commands ahead of time, like this red one here. For these, the command delay will start ticking down right away. Then later we can reactivate them and they'll get executed immediately. This means that the further ahead we can plan, the more responsive our forces will be. But of course, as the plans get more complicated or more units depend on what other units do, they do get a bit fragile because we can only pencil in a single contingency. Half to create a little more friction, but also half to help us deal with these limitations. We have a suite of various commands with parameters and conditions. This is in 3 parts. First, formation, which controls how the units maintain position relative to one another. Second, operating procedures, which modify the way orders are taken out, for example by choosing the sort of path that will be followed or the range at which hard and soft targets, vehicles and infantry basically, will be engaged. And finally, we have a range of actual commands. Maybe we want a unit to advance to a position, or maybe we prefer to use the contact order, which will start doing that, but they'll stop in place if they encounter enemies or get fired on. We still can, and often will, give individual vehicles and squads commands on exactly where to park themselves and the direction to look. It does increase the command delay, often by a lot, but more significantly, it changes the vibe of the game. I also suspect it sometimes gives you a little too much edge over the AI. I'm hoping that I can avoid becoming a bit too myopic on this while playing Armored Brigade with you, dear reader. Now you can put on that commander's hat while we work out what to make of the map. Napoleon's bicorn? MacArthur's wacky distressed cap? They've got some good ones. Over here, hang on, they've given me a toy. Over here is the Finger Forest. I think this is a huge boon to the enemy. They can use this as cover to choose when and where to reveal themselves and engage. they can use it to get closer if they choose. And while they're fighting, the trees will provide a little bit of concealment and protection. The thick forest in the north nominally shares some of the properties of the finger forest, in that it's connected to our deployment and not theirs. But actually, since we stand no chance of effectively covering this gap any sooner than they'd be able to use it, it's not so useful. Or rather, it's not actually any more useful to us than it is to them. But what is to our benefit is that the village itself is... actually, it's only a little bit closer to us, but I think that we're going to be able to get in there far quicker and easier. Very importantly, we should be able to control all the large, tall buildings. That's the Auerberg Hall, and this pair up the top I might as well call the warehouses. Look at the lines of sight from these things. I think the warehouses is actually interesting. They're big buildings, but they're actually a little bit away from the village, although they have coverage over it. Maybe not in this battle, though. Perhaps if you included this bit of the map in a larger battle, or one that went in a slightly different direction. This height mode here is an easy way to identify hills that will be vantage points. This is our best hill, I think. It's a little far forward, which makes it dangerous to get to, I think. But in exchange it allows it to cover more angles. I love that it seems to have a clear view of the road in the middle of the finger forest. But I think their vantage point in the southeast here is much stronger. It's adjacent to both the finger forest and this plain here that we can't get coverage on. It means they're going to be able to deploy to it quickly and safely. Although I see now that we do actually have our own finger, a lesser finger. You can't see right up the hill from it, but it could just provide a staging area if we need to assault the southeastern vantage point to clear it out. All in all, however, I characterise this as a fairly symmetrical battlefield. This means that the asymmetry in our force compositions will be the significant factor, which in turn means armour. It means armour. To the extent that the advantage is stronger guns and thicker protection, we want to engage at the maximum possible range, which is what main battle tanks do. Because as you get to a closer range, you start to reach a threshold where the lower caliber is effective enough. Now that I think about it, actually, there's a similar rule of thumb for the component advantage that is better training, at least where that means better accuracy. This is about the time I like to literally turn the tables and try to think about things from the opponent's side and see what I come up with. I think that the East Germans also want to be thinking about leveraging the force asymmetry. For them, that's greater numbers, and to capitalise on that, they're going to want first contact to be on as wide a front as possible, and involving as many individuals as possible. I might line up in the forest and then move forward as a body to the edge all at once. But I also want to make some use of the vantage point, right? It could happen there. How about this for an approach to deployment at initial orders? We visit every type of unit one by one, work out what their role is given their specialisations, and fit them into the map. We start with recon. Recon units have a special power. We can deploy them all the way up to the middle line, but they can't occupy objectives. This one's a no-brainer. I think you're mad if you don't simply place them in each of the big buildings. Is there a reason to keep them together? They both seem to be equipped the same with a perfectly good radio. They do have access to this command called Infiltrate, which can potentially get you deployed even deeper, but no point to use it here. These spots are perfect already. All these little scout squads are going to do is hide and recon the entire battle. Their eyes are so much more valuable than any shooting they might do that I always make sure they're facing the right way and that they have orders to hold fire. They'll probably never get detected. Another nice and simple one, artillery. These go safely at the back of the map, out of the way of harm. Everything they need to know, they learn it on the radio. So why bring them on map at all? I don't want to think too much about artillery right now. I included them just in case we got into one of these situations where they're kind of not optional. Here's a thought. Would optimal play be to make sure that every formation has a deactivated order at deployment? A sort of speculative plan B that, even if it's unlikely to happen, you'd rather get for free without a command delay if it did? Life's too short for it, but since artillery takes a little time to zero in, I think it's a bit more appealing to do something similar with them. I've pointed them at a couple of places where the East Germans might emerge from the finger forest. It's a gamble, but if they do happen to appear right in these boxes, we can just click and drop a few bombs on them in no time. Next, we'll do the mechanised troop transports. Is that what these are? What's with the massive gun? Apparently that's called a 20mm autocannon. Look, I'm not one of these guys who can recognise all the different types of tank from quite a long way away, but I don't think this thing is normal. I also don't really know what an autocannon is for off the top of my head. But the game always has the important numbers for you. Accuracy and penetration compared to distance. Let's cross-reference these to our actual big guns, the main cannons of our main battle tank. The numbers on the APCs are drastically lower. 20mm is obviously a lot bigger than your typical machine gun. Here's what I think this means. We can make the best of multiple traits. The rule of thumb is kind of becoming the golden rule. The weaker you are, the closer you have to get to be effective. I think these autocannons might be just the ticket for if we need to rush the southeastern vantage point from the lesser finger. That's what I've set up, and the command for actually assaulting the hill will be deactivated. Conveniently, of course, we pass through the village to get to the lesser finger, so we can drop off the infantry on the way. Lovely. Our armoured platoon. If range is going to be our chief weapon in this matchup, these are our superstars. They'll just be heading straight to the hill where they can get the best vision. Although, I know I said we couldn't block access to the thick forest, but if we detach one or two tanks, they can do such a great job of covering the corridor just south of the thick forest. Why? Just to generally block off another opportunity to, in the abstract, prevent enemy options for free movement in a sort of northeast to southwest axis. I think I might be talking nonsense, but let's see. Finally, the poor old infantry. Conditions on our side of the board aren't ideal for them. Crossing the open field is obviously going to be a hazard. But for now, we know that the enemy are stuck in the deployment zone, so it's certainly not going to be getting any safer for them. The purple line here means move fast. They're going to be using the relative safety of this low ground, the greenish strip, to get into the village, because that's where infantry are strongest. We have to capitalise on the advantage we identified of having better access to Schwarz. Sound enough logic to go all in, but I couldn't resist putting something on the other side. What I think is going to happen here is that this is going to be a small, short battle, and this platoon is going to spend the entirety of it trudging through the thick forest. They're going to finally get in position and still have nothing to do because This is, after all, a battle for an objective in the south half of the map. But on the other hand, if they do have an opportunity to emerge from hiding and surprise someone in a flank? Enfilade, I think, is a more appropriate term to use in modern warfare. Whatever it is, it's going to be a real doozy and we're going to love watching it. I think this might be the entirety of our plans. Here is the #1 hero of our nation, the spearhead of our glorious tank platoon. The battle gets going when he gets going. After just a moment to get the formation perfect, #1 hero of our nation here spearheads our glorious force into glorious battle. But what good is #1 without the man just a little bit back and a little to his left? Glorious hero #2 of our glorious nation, who will be following. If you're seeing some green icons around, they're just neutral bystanders. There's a few icons all around the battlefield right now that represent secondary indications of enemy sighting. Someone heard an engine, someone saw some dust kicked up, someone thought they saw a muzzle flash, but some of them are going to be false alarms. Some of them are going to be like this character here. Guy in field, red shirt and blue pants. Just standing out there. Dressed like Gilligan and doing nothing. Get out of here, Denton. This is serious. My captains are going to do a lot more than hit you with a hat. That's Harry Infield, ladies and gents. Oh, we need to focus here. The glory is going to start real soon, I'm sure. Oh, look, our glorious bus has made a glorious stop. Sorry if this causes us to miss the first actual combat, but people keep ringing the bell. I decided to go all in on rushing the square. The sooner we get into the objective, the sooner we can start getting those victory points. Also, I'm already doing some individual unit orders. I figure the smaller the battle, the more excusable it is. And I also reckon that as I work out how to use the formations and all the tools a little bit better, maybe there's a combo that would have done this just right for me anyway. I just want our troop carriers, the Langs, on the edge of the lesser finger. They can hardly see anything from it. The point is just that they'll be able to rush the southeastern hill quickly and not have to make any more corners or drive through any forested tiles. And now the glory, which I'm sure is going to happen any second now. I'm clicking on them here just to let us see some detail. Down in the bottom left we see an image of them. Just want to make sure the commander has his head out and is spotting as hard as he can. See the turret searching around. I'm hoping that on that card we're going to see some arrows on the circle, which will indicate where there are sightings and clues. I do think, however, I moved them a bit far forward. They'll have better coverage of the road through the finger if we reverse them just a little bit. I wonder what sort of path the infantry are taking. Did you hear that? I don't think they've decided on the actual path quite yet. Told you I heard something. Some enemy mortars coming down there, but they're too late. We're already well past that spot. "6 minutes and 5 seconds, our first confirmed sighting of the enemy. Exactly as expected, a tracked vehicle of some sort has headed to the front line of the Finger Forest. It was spotted by the scout in the warehouses. That's what the blue circle around the enemy means. The little upside down V icon is the Jeep with the ATGMs I spent the spare change on. It's anti-tank guided missiles. They're pretty effective, but they take a little longer to aim than a tank cannon. Although our tanks seem to be having a hard time spotting it, I don't see the blue circles, and that's not glorious. Great news, by the way. As of 6 minutes 47, we controlled the objective. Kaboom! It's a glorious miss. 7 minutes 2 seconds, enemy jets inbound. Don't pay too much attention to me checking random sightlines all the time. Can never check enough of these things. One strafing each platoon of vehicles. Not so bad. Oh no, they've got bombs. Now it's 7:39, the first casualty of the battle. It's one of Tres Hombres. And a Lang. This is the opposite of glorious. This shit is apart, man. And there's a lot of smoke coming from the dead tank, but I figure that's going to interfere with their aim as much as it interferes with ours. Well, we got him, but we were aiming to outclass them a bit more here. We need to get more of them more quickly. I'm realising right about now that when you have a small force, and relatively when you have a smaller force than the enemy, luck and upsets are far more significant. The little lads over in the south need a little bit more help, I think. Fortifying an objective is important. It's worth a few extra clicks to make sure everyone's in a building and covered, right? I'll do it for the rest of the infantry when they arrive shortly as well. But what's the best way to do it? I think you want to do it in depth, I think. Especially now that we already control it. Because why? I don't know, because it's something real commanders do and they say it's good? I had to think about what defense in depth actually means sometime, actually. What I'm saying by upsets, by the way, is that obviously when you only have 6 tanks on the field, losing one is a big deal. But also, what if the shot you lost it to was a 1% chance? The armoured forces are still exchanging blows. I think I saw us withstand a shot there a moment ago, which is a good sign. Tanking it, as gamers say. That doesn't feel right when it's not a metaphor. Oh no! Not a good sign. Oh yes? A better sign? We still need to get a better tank-for-tank exchange rate in this one though. The infantry in the objective seem to be getting a little shelled. But you don't pull out of the objective, do you? I think that so long as they stay in the buildings, keep their heads down, they'll stay in there a long time and it'll be worth it. Keep their mortars busy too. But what am I going to do about the armour? This is a problem. We have to focus firepower. Bring in the other 2 tanks, we need everything we got. Oh balls, we've lost them all. Change of plan, we don't need everything we got. Instead, don't make the same mistake. But what do the 2 remaining tanks do? I fretted about the issue for a minute or two and couldn't come up with anything. So for the moment, I consider the 2 remaining tanks to be in reserve. But they do have a deactivated order to come up to the Western Vantage when needed. Or maybe we call it Slaughter Hill now? Being in reserve, to be honest, is adjacent to defence in depth, in that I say it because I've heard the words before, but I like to shoot my gun, but I don't know what it means. I think that when you see streets running at different angles to each other like this, it means you have great sight lines, and you have to make sure to put people to use every individual angle. We won't delve into the interface right now, but I suspect that there's a combination of free formation, which means they don't maintain any particular position relative to each other, and a couple of options like seeking cover when you're choosing the path or when contact happens. That might be a better way to do what I'm doing here. There's also this defend order, which takes up covered positions with a line of sight to a particular spot that I should probably be using a bit more. Oh, great shot. That mortar has caused dashing, which I assume is some sort of half panic state where they'll continue to carry out their orders so long as they don't involve continuing to stand right underneath the barrage. Which is good, I don't want them dead for no reason either. Our side isn't the evil commie Nazis. Oh, word. The reserves have spotted targets. They're playing from the bench and winning. Champs. Maybe I'm just starting to learn what defence in depth and reserve forces are about, huh? At the very least, there's an egg-to-basket calculus in there. It's not good to see that armour are starting to shoot at the buildings that our squads are in. That's not the same as the mortars. That's not sustainable. We can't wear it. But what can we do about it? If they're staying still to do it, maybe we can start to train mortars on them? Doesn't look like they are staying still. And they'd better not, because I've got my eye on them. I do not like that the Langs are doing nothing. And not looking like they're ever going to do anything like this. I don't see them moving on to the Southeastern Vantage in a hurry. So what if I moved onto it myself? Could it possibly prevent them from coming out of the forest, at least along the road? It's too late. There's already a lot of activity over here, and it looks like they're main battle tanks. We can't drive straight into those at that distance. They'll outgun us. There's always value in speculatively training these mortars on the paths we think they're going to take in the future. Or at least it keeps my fingers busy. Oh look, a bit of luck. The reserves are at it again. Those two can see... They can see the entire southeastern vantage. That's great. We needed good news. My little lads are eating it in there though. I'll check on them every now and then, but what do you do? Might be worth putting a few more of them into the actual objectives. If they're gonna die, at least we're gonna keep scoring points for them as long as possible. Oh, but not if there's gonna be a tank machine gunning into the objective like that. Stay in your houses. Oh, they're not all in the houses. You can retreat a little if you have to, guys, but trust me, you're safer inside than outside. The dynamic duo over here is still getting stuff done. Imagine if we had 3 more of them around, also being useful. Oh look, somebody walked in the square. Can't they see the square? Let them have it, baby. But where's the bombs? There's supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom. Oh, that's okay, I guess. That was a 120mm mortar. It didn't look like star blazers going off, but I think that's going to do nicely if it hits anything there right on the dome piece. In terms of photography, back here is the angle. Just sitting here watching them die or not. We're starting to spot a bit of enemy infantry. They're trying to get into the village. And of course they are, that's where the objective is. I would love... I suspect this is why autocannons aren't normal, as I said. Right now I'd rather have these vehicles have some sort of machine gun on them. It would be the best defense against the infantry coming into the town. As in, it's hard to arm a troop carrier well enough to take on armour proper. So better to have them in a place where we can more competently use them to dominate infantry. But you know, the autocannon may not be the appropriate calibre for shooting directly at human beings, but they're still not going to appreciate it. So I'm going to park these guys at the end of streets at those angles and hopefully stop them getting too deep in. I don't think we really have to worry about a river this small. It doesn't really stop anything. I guess if it came into play at just the right moment. And now back to the hill. Ringo! These Venga buses here got zero opportunity to party. But don't laugh. Wait till we're fighting a battle in a decade or two, when one of these HEGMs is strapped to every vehicle and carried by every squad. More boom? Have we caught this guy sleeping? That's mortar food. Well, we're beaten to it by an autocannon. That's what the autocannons are for, exactly. I mean, overall, I don't know if it's generally wise to move motorised forces into the village like that. But they can't not do it if you don't not let them. As in, when we say urban environments are not safe for armoured vehicles, the streets and the houses don't actually do the shooting. You still have to put some guys in there. As I predicted, the platoon in the thick forest still don't look like they're going to be super useful. But if they're going to have any chance of contributing, we need them to be right at the edge, ready to spring into action. So I'll give them some attention over here. I think I'm seeing the autocannon do more good. And I definitely see some infantry fighting infantry. That's some sort of milestone. Kind of represents a new phase of combat, I reckon. But in this tiny battle, it's not like I could set anything aside to get going once it started. Can't redirect anything. I wonder what it would be if you did do that. I guess it sort of puts us into endgame. Now we're mostly waiting for things that have already been put in place to resolve. Hang on though, if their squads have to stop to duke it out with ours, we can use the artillery to put some real evil on them. In the side, got him! I've changed my mind. You can call me an autocan fan. I mean, it's great luck that I was able to put them at those cross-angled streets. But it's perfect for blindsiding them and hitting some of these vehicles in the soft side armour. Definitely glad they're not still sitting around with their thumbs up waiting to assault that hill like I originally had them. This HQ unit, by the way, with its blue circle, it came with the infantry company. And if the other formations from the company are in that circle, they get some bonuses, like better information sharing, reduced command delay, and better morale. Uh-oh, their vehicles are defending themselves somehow. Yeah, I guess that's how it goes. Langs versus proper main battle tanks. They didn't last long. The Lang didn't last long. Not once they didn't have their positional advantage or any surprise. Did you see a few rounds bounce off the front armour of some enemy tanks? It looks like their armour is rolling right into town. Like I mentioned before, this is generally considered a mistake. What's going to happen is that he'll be driving around these tight streets, and the infantry in these buildings will clean them up at close range with their RPGs. Having said that, I don't have so many in there anymore, do I? I never really thought of the possibility, to be honest. I just went with the rule, infantry are the tool for taking urban objectives. And I'm not going to think about it anymore until we see how well it turns out for them. The twins over here really do have eyes on a lot of people now, huh? Look at all the blue circles. Since I think they're unlikely to ever really close in with them, I'm going to be telling them to fire the machine guns at maximum range. I think it means they won't kill them very much, but the suppression it provides will definitely help our own infantry fight back. And if it makes them stop and hit the deck, we can give them the old 1-2 with the mortar while they're down there. Up until now, we've mostly used hold fire to not give our positions away. But with what I just did there, the downside is that those tanks will sooner or later use up all their machine gun ammo. They're also coming through here, but not for free. That's the end of the magnets for the autocannons. Did you see the perfect illustration at the end there? When we caught them in the side before, we were getting a couple of kills from a couple of hits. But before the last one blew there, it bounced multiple rounds off the front of the enemy tank. Buddy, that's way too close. Could someone punish this APC, please? I want to see some rockets. Am I missing something about the way these close-range anti-tank weapons work? Why is this man still alive? And look at the prick, he's not even buttoned up. It's just gone. I didn't see any rocket. Did we maybe use one of those high caliber rifles or something? Jaeger Squad 00 heat ammo. It was a humble rifle grenade. Good call, actually. I wonder why he wasn't packing a little more. Because that squad was on the front line, I assumed they'd come out of the Langs. These are a designated Panzer Grenadier platoon, which means you can expect them to have a little bit of extra anti-tank equipment. But I guess these guys were all elsewhere, shall we say? Instead, the platoon came from the Jaeger company, which is translated, I think it's just riflemen. I think that if we look in here, we see that the squads actually have slightly different armaments between them. No, that's not true. They all have a rocket launcher. The squad in question must have been the platoon headquarters. They have only the rifle grenade. Did the trick though, didn't it? I don't think I'm doing a great job managing these mortars. There's someone in this square right now, at least. Old mate here is going to cause some trouble, isn't he? I don't have anything around which can bother him at all. He can just park there and keep firing at his leisure. Oh, but he forgot one of the rules. Never stay still when there's mortar around. When I said I took the mortar just because sometimes it's not optional, this is just the sort of impasse I was probably thinking about. These guys too. The rule is double when you're infantry. That's going to be your last mistake. I don't understand why the tanks have lost vision. Did they panic a little and drop back? There's this replay which you can consult, and it shows that the tanks never drop back. Maybe this line of sight mode reflects changed conditions? They don't seem to have buttoned up, but maybe there's just so much smoke everywhere from burning vehicles that it's generally harder to see. I think the explanation is that everything I saw them shoot at earlier was actually further on the east, where they could see and still can see. But I don't dare bring them forward right now, so like before, I consider them in reserve. Going to pay a little bit of attention here to see if this mortar works. I don't need destruction right here. I just need to dislodge this guy. That dropped next to him and he did nothing. Honey Badger didn't care. Wait, I've spotted a distraction too entertaining to miss. Will someone please rid me of this turbulent armor? Like, get him, please. This Weisenheimer thinks he can roll into my objective with his entire head and torso stuck out of the porthole? Are you going to let that stand? It's an insult. Oh, look, With their focus on the objective now, I think it's safe to break open the piggy bank. As in, it's an opportunity for the reserve tanks to engage. And there's now rather a few infantry coming across the fields, even further to the north, which I think means it's going to be great to put them at the western vantage point. They're going to be super effective, well out of range of personal anti-tank weapons, plenty within range to return machine gun fire, and no cover in between. And the thick forest platoon can help with this a little bit. Long command delay up here. The platoon are split from the company, the squads are split from the platoon, and the company headquarters is out of range. Okay, now the fact that this tank is not on fire is starting to bother me. Obviously the squads aren't doing too well, so perhaps they're just cowering. But what are the stats on the rocket launchers? 280 metre max range with only a 24% chance. But they are rocking 6 of them. I like those odds. Let loose, lads. Send them. Don't bring any rockets home. Look at this. Thick forest squads are getting some shots in. Oh no, what saddest ordered these poor schmucks to crawl through the middle of the meadow, on top of the hill, between the 2 sniper nests, towards the tanks. And you wonder why your citizens are always climbing the wall. What the fuck is going on in Schwarz right now? It's hot as hell. There's bullets coming from everywhere to everywhere. Oh, I'm overwhelmed, but we must have the advantage, all things considered, because we're in the buildings. But please ice the tanks. If you've got them, launch them. Finally, that's what I wanted to see. We're in danger now of losing control over the objective. But it ain't over till it's over. That final squad could just about stick it out, you know. Sometimes infantry in buildings, you just can't get them out. The tank's now definitely starting to help, relieving a bit of pressure up there. I wish the thick forest boys were already in there though. I should have used a fast order. Look, I know it's dangerous, but you guys are going to want to get in there soon. Trust the tanks are going to be making you an opening. Tanks, by the way, are still doing heaven's work. They can see everyone, the blue circles. The blue line, by the way, is current target. Legends are sure, but imagine if General Brilliance here hadn't blundered. And I said it before, but 5 is a lot more than 3. I told you not to think it was over. Squad is hanging in there, and I'm sure there's fewer vehicles than when I last looked. Unless they're all in that little cluster of faded icons there, which I have to assume represents contacts we just saw go out of line of sight and you can still kind of predict where they're at. Oh, my man here is in fact a man. His friends are all dead, he's out of rockets, he's broken, he's suppressed, and he hasn't washed his jeans in 3 months and more. But the square is still green and that's what counts. Can't change an order from advanced to fast advance if you've already plotted it. So just get going, guys. It all counts. Even the scout, you take a few shots. All hands here. Did my sound blaster just melt from all the gunfire? No, it looks like the objective is blue and just nobody shot anybody for 10 seconds. What's going on? I don't know, but I think the street north of the hall is still crawling with those unseen infantry and vehicles, so it's not safe to try to move back into the objective. It's been over 45 minutes now, so hopefully all the time we were in control has set us up for victory. Look at what I've done to this Hessian rural ideal, though. Everybody's dead, Dave. Look, I confess I love taking objectives. Maybe I'm associated with Pyrrhic victories. Like Pyrrhus. That's okay, because these aren't real, traumatized, maimed men with orphans and widows. Which is why it's actually a little funny when I keep telling them to stay in the damn houses and then they go outside the damn houses and die. Did that guy just drop dead while I was trying to read his stats? Did I just nag him to death? Oh no, he's only panicked, but you know, you can panic inside. Did you see that? One last rocket from 30 metres away, and they're out of points. That is a tactical victory to the FRG. That's us, by the way. You can clap now. Have a walk with me in the world of hindsight. The game can't be saved after the battle is over, so you might see the last minute or two diverge here. Sorry, it's not significant. Having never actually been a West German military commander, I guess I chose the soft easy chair, I can't be sure, but I suspect that when you're told to go capture something, there's implicit understanding that, capture or no, you're supposed to come back with some men and some vehicles alive and intact. And beside that, what colour is that objective right now? They control that thing by any possible interpretation. That's why, even though this card says victory, I don't give myself a passing grade for this one. Most of these games tend to measure the objective control by who holds it at the end rather than the time ticket system for most situations. I trust there's a design reason why they do it differently here, probably to do with the dynamic objectives or maybe the scale. I made it extra unnatural by being so aggressive so early. I think I even said I wanted to go in there to get victory points. You're always at least half responsible for your own immersion, and I think that doing it that way kind of compounded this break from what you might call realism as the battle went on. Disclaimer again, I've never actually done it, but when the enemy decides to take the objective at all costs, doesn't your new mission become to maximise those costs and make sure they're paid in full? Boss, the enemy commander says to someone, comrade, we already took out most of their vehicles, but they're pretty fortified in the village itself. Is it really important to actually hold that clay tonight? After all, if we had to fight another scenario soon, I'd be down everything. All too complicated for a computer opponent and a mission generator, so we wound up in this overly gamey situation where they had to assault the town just because it's what the game is about, right? Getting into the goal hard and fast can absolutely be a great tactic, but it doesn't look like this. Perhaps this is exactly what it looks like when it goes wrong. This reckoning gets worse. This isn't quite the even battle that I made it out to be. I did a bit of snooping after the numbers I saw on that battle summary came up and didn't seem right to me, and discovered a thing. Between the different nations, organisational units might have different sizes. Specifically, West German tank platoon, 5 vehicles. East German, 3. So they only had 1 more tank than us. The jets I gave them as partial compensation instead. Every time they do a run, there's a random chance they don't come back. They made 1 run and it was devastating. Let's have a look at these flying fellas. 37mm. Bigger by half again than those autocannons I was glazing, so they're absolutely going to do something. 23mm, has a use. And bombs. Iron bombs. Doesn't sound like such an impressive weapon. Aren't this kind of thing normally given a kilogram value, indicating how much explosive is in them? Iron bomb to me is the little metal balls with the fuse on top that spy versus spy hide in each other's birthday cakes. I couldn't find in the client where you can see some numbers for the damage of the bombs, but they're the things that killed our tanks, and here's Wikipedia. Iron bomb is just a formal name for, well, a bomb. So in the 2020s, you fly a plane over a massive building and drop enough ordnance on it to level it. And if they weren't guided by computers, the thing you just used has the same name as the weapon that killed Archduke Ferdinand. At any rate, they only carry 2 of them, so in that department they're one-pump chumps, but in other games I've definitely seen them come back at least 3 times and cause considerable strife every time. So I got lucky there. Although luckiest would have been if the bombs missed. I'm not trying to excuse my blunder. The armoured platoon burnt because I threw them away, and that was the first thing that happened in the battle. I spent far too much time scratching my whiskers and talking patronising about range being our number 1 advantage, but then I didn't put the time and effort in with the charts and the rulers, did I? Western Vantage was too close to maintain the advantage of superior firepower and armour. I should have trusted the height map and gone straight to the reddest part of it. All the way over here, practically in deployment. Great vision, and instead of engaging at 1500 metres, would have been over 2k.
Exactly the numbers we needed, if I remember correctly. This is something I didn't know. HEAT ammo has equal penetration at all distance. It's a secondary explosion that happens on a hit, so that makes sense, but I just assumed there was some drop-off. I guess I imagined that the initial hit has to make some penetration to help the secondary blast do its thing. But all this other ammo works exactly as expected, and considering that improved aim is a factor, I don't think the golden rule changes. Maybe the curve of it is tweaked a little bit. I can't resist this. Let's quickly run a alternate timeline where I do head up to the hill first thing. It speaks for itself. In this timeline, our infantry probably don't need to spend the next 30 minutes being constantly blasted by tank cannon. Our own vehicles will be able to move in there to give them a bit of help. When I did order those tanks forward to Slaughter Hill, I said something like it was to get better coverage, but I can't explain what I meant by that. I think I have some sort of incorrect assumption about the way light and shapes and eyeballs, I guess, work going on there. What was I thinking? As you creep the line of sight tool closer and closer to the enemy being at 12, there are new angles, of course. 5 and 7 open up as you see a little bit around the corners, but for the same reason there's a bit of decline at 2 and 10. Something to think about later when the opposing forces move forward, but the opposite of what you need at minute 0 when we know that they're all in the deployment zone. Another disadvantage of moving forward in terms of vision is if there's a post, say the warehouse in front of you, as you move closer to that post, it obscures more and more of what's behind it. I don't think these angles are what I thought I was talking about. I think I was thinking more along the lines of, as you get closer to your target, a degree of your vision is finer. As I mean, if there's a minimum amount that you can increment a horizontal visual scan, as you get closer, that degree covers less of the enemy line, so you have greater resolution. It's true, but that's just the mechanic of the thing we already call it's easier to see and aim when you're closer. It's already accounted for. I double counted this factor, and I think I get it. Imagine yourself trying to spot someone hiding in those trees for a little while, like I was doing the whole of setup. You just want to get closer. You start pulling your chair close to your computer screen. Well, the tanks in their position was the big one, but what other concerns are there? Once they were in the objective, I expected the infantry to eat a little explosion as part of a balanced diet, but I served them a very fatal cheat day. This thing is a little bit binary. I think that if you're able to put any amount of pressure or even any amount of distraction on the vehicles that were shelling the objective from anything anywhere, they pretty much have to take all their attention away for a long time. I don't think the outcome is some sort of sign that you can't trust men to hold buildings when conditions are right, which is when they're supported. In fact, I think you can trust them to take it when conditions are anything above awful. And in fact, I kind of appreciate being given an example of awful, to be able to see what it looks and feels like when men can't hold an objective. I did fail to appreciate how the buildings themselves are raised and therefore they can be targeted from more places. You can't, like those blind sages, check the line of sight from the elephant here and say that, oh, this position is hidden, and then check the line of sight from here and say the position is fortified and it commands a defence of the approach to itself. Those are different places. So not like the proverbial elephant at all, actually. The same terrain features that made the safe path for the infantry to get in there relatively unbothered also mean that our vantages have less views on the objective itself. It would have been harder for us to assault it. But our vantage does, however, have plenty of coverage on the approaches to the village from which the enemy would do their counter-assault, which is why we had to be the defenders of the objective, and I stand by the decision to get in there first and fast. Just not quite that fast. That was so fast that it's probably why I made mistakes. It was reckless. How about the thing with the autocannons? You know that bit in Phantom Menace where Jar Jar Binks personally takes out like 2 whole regiments of droids single-handedly over the course of the battle for Naboo simply by tripping over his own dick and saying, "Wowzers?" Well, I have to say, wowzers? Some credit. I identified that they were only effective when they had a combination of surprise and positional advantage. Perhaps this is the mimetic. When you're sitting in one of these games watching all the contacts you've made vanish after they move about 3 pixels, when you're watching your turret spin around like they're trying to make a milkshake and not spotting anything, even though it's like right in front of them from your point of view, just remember that the fog of war is equally brutal for the other side. It's not an intuitive thing to keep in mind, I think, which is why I probably always forget to reposition. What you're supposed to do in that sort of situation is give those Langs the Homer loves Flanders order and have them melt back into the trees. Then you can move around and get another jump at another angle. Hell, can't you just wait a minute for them to lose concentration and turn around and then move straight back in and get exactly the same jump at exactly the same angle over and over again? Oh, and did you catch me calling the rocket launchers RPGs as if it was still 1945? You no longer need to crawl right up an armoured vehicle's nose to serve it with explosives. All in all, the position of the infantry in the village needed a little more thought and time, and admittedly I didn't give it much effort. A few more hold fire orders, I reckon. In particular, imagine a squad or 2 hiding in the Auerburg Hall itself, unseen, and not even giving them the order to shoot until maybe there's multiple vehicles in the square. It was my own fault that the rockets weren't there when I needed them. But I did have a chuckle whinging at my digital dudes as if it was their fault. And the rifle grenade that I called humble, stuck in the Second World War again. I was thinking of something like this thing that looks like they just forced the fucking thing in the end there. But Cold War era, start thinking more along the lines of the things that we colloquially call grenade launchers. What about the next one? I'll have a think, but how about responding to my complete mismanagement of the armour and coming at it as an angle of something like how to not lose all of it? Combined arms, you might call the theme.